Well, greetings and salutations, folks. I hope everyone is still doing well, and welcome to this second and night ending bonus upload. Before we jump into it, a quick couple of links. As many of you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. These audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support the channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost a cent. Click the like button, takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads that I put out daily, click the bell icon. And folks, please leave a comment and share the video. Why? Well, because these things really do help the channel to continue to grow and go. They definitely do matter, and they are appreciated. And with that, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump in to the second and night ending bonus upload, shall we? Had a conversation with a gentleman who asked me specifically. He had heard me talk about how I use a phone that I buy minutes for and I turn it off after I'm done using it. It is easily, I mean, with the government and their capabilities, they can trace whatever they want. But it's much harder to do because, one, it's not connected to the internet at all. Two, there are no apps on it. And three, I buy like a month worth of minutes for it anytime I use it. Anytime I use it to talk to a subscriber, I immediately delete the phone call or phone conversation and turn it right off. And I put it in a Faraday bag. So, I mean, if indeed they wanted to figure out who I had talked to on it, they could, but it would be much harder than my regular phone. So he wanted to share the experience with me that he had. And he had taken it upon himself to actually do what I do. He said he's gonna keep it in a Faraday bag, and keep it at his work in his work locker with it off. He's a little nervous, and I cannot blame him because the experience is quite chilling. So I know his real name, but he wanted me to go by because where he lives is, well, he said there's a few things that I could share. One, the experience took place in 2010. He was 24 years old. It took place in Patrick County, Virginia, where he is from. I'll just give you a rough Patrick County, Virginia. And he wanted to use not his real name, not his dad's real name, but his granddad's real name because people called his granddad a nickname, and up until the point where he had passed away, he thought that his grandfather's nickname was his name, and he didn't, when his granddad died, he said, "Who's George?" And they said, "That's your grandfather." And he's like, "No, it's not. That's his name." So we'll refer to this gentleman as George. 24 years old in 2010. He's 40 years old now. And he had just gotten out of the military. I'm not going to share which branch because, once again, he just does not want any leads There's enough leads, right, that I just gave you, but so vague. He was very much a cocky dick, in his own words. And this experience fixed it completely. April 17th, 2010, a day he will remember for the rest of his life. And it happened off of one of the largest or longest roads in Patrick County, Virginia. Like I said, I'm going to be vague on some details to protect his privacy. But it's easy if you look up Patrick County, you can see and find the longest road in the county. But you're not going to be able to find out where the experience happened, because we're not going to get that in depth. He also does not want anybody to go into that area and have what occurred to him and his buddy at that point in time. So he and his buddy, which we're not going to give his friend a name. He didn't share his friend's name with me, actually. On April 17th, they decided that he had just gotten out of the military a couple months prior to this. And he had heard from his best friend that there was a couple of fellas that he knew that were much older than he was, that had a kind of a corn mash still set up in the woods somewhere off the longest road in Patrick County. And their plan was they were going to, and like he said, he was a cocky person. He had just gotten out of the military. He was still riding that rush. He had been deployed twice and had seen action. He was just looking for any kind of rush to feed his kind of adrenaline seeking. And their plan was, there was a couple of guys that they knew, and apparently they were older than him, but he had dealt with them back in the day before he had went into the military. And they were going to go and find this area where this still was, this corn mash still, and they were going to go in and take as much white lightning as they could, and that's just moonshine. And they were going to do it deviously. He did not care. He said, "I am not this way anymore." He said, and that's one of the reasons why I don't want you sharing my real name. Because he had turned his life around completely. So in this experience is what helped fix his life and the road he was leading down, because he had contemplated on doing some, even though he was in the military and in a branch that is very disciplined. He was going down a bad road. He thinks a lot of it was because of things that he had seen while on deployment, and he couldn't deal with it. So they were literally going to go rob these guys, and they knew full on that they had they carried firearms out there, and they would protect their still and their product. So as they are driving down this road, actually they had just turned onto this road. They had seen a large kind of what looked like a convoy truck, a military kind of surplus truck. And it had just pulled out of this kind of dirt road that is off of this very long road. And him and his buddy looked at each other, because as they drove by, sure enough, there were two military, probably NCOs, but just military, in their uniforms, and just pulled out. They instantly look at each other and they're like, "What the hell?" This is an area that they know fairly well, and they pass. As they are going by, they see he looks directly at the driver, and he sees a passenger, and he kind of gives them like kind of a military nod, just like, that recognition. And as they pass each other, his buddy kind of looked to see what was on the plates, and he said, "Holy shit, there's two guys in the back of that truck with M16s." And he proceeded then to correct his best friend and say, "M4s, idiot. M4s is what they use." And that was just, and he said that to me specifically to really show, what kind of cocky kind of dick he was. He could have, like any normal person would have let it go, like now he lets it go when people call a magazine a clip, like, and that's irritating if you're into gun culture. But so they get to where the road is that they had just pulled out of, and they slow down a little bit, and he looks up in his rear view. He said, "I didn't use my brakes because I didn't want to signal to the truck that we were stopping. I just wanted to make it look like, we were still going, but we slowed down to quite the crawl." And he said that when we looked down that road, why would there be a military vehicle coming out of that road? And as they look, you see this dirt road, and there's kind of a curve in the road, maybe 200-300 feet down this dirt road. And because of the trees, you are only able to see just a little bit of a kind of metal gate, a gate that would be used for cattle on a ranch or whatnot. And he sees the brake lights on the truck that now has, gone some distance. They put their brake lights on, and he's like, "Huh." He goes, "There's where they had hit their brakes, there's no curves, there's nothing. It's, there is a curve, but it's not enough to hit your brake for. It's pretty much smooth sailing if you take that road." And he kind of gives it gas and goes, because he's now aware of, oh shit, they may think that, because we were there for quite some time. And he's thinking, did I put my brakes on? Did I push down on my brakes? And he's like, "I don't think so." And maybe it's just because we didn't appear to be moving as fast as they were. And he said, "So I just punched it and got out of there." He said there's this, about 2 miles down, there's a little pull off the side of the road. And there's a kind of a little hiking trail on the other side of the road. So there's just enough to maybe park 5 or 6 cars. And right across the street is this trail to go hiking on. And there's quite a few, I guess, in this region that are state and county maintained. And so they're just talking amongst themselves. What the hell was that? You know, you've lived here. You were here while I was, on deployment. You never heard anything like this. You've never seen anything like this in this area. This is easily, he counted 2, but then his buddy counted 2 in the back of the vehicle. So there's 4. What are they hauling out of there? And why would they need 4 soldiers, U.S. soldiers, in the middle of, Patrick County, Virginia? They make the decision of, let's turn back around. Let's drive by it again. That truck's long gone by now. And if there's no one in that area, if there's not another vehicle coming out or another vehicle, even if it's not military, we'll just go right by it and, we'll circle back and we'll continue with our original plan. But we still got more than enough time. It's pretty early in the day. It was like 10:30 in the morning. And so his buddy reluctantly agrees. He's like, let's just do the plan. We're geared up for the plan. And he goes, I'm going to be a couple minutes out of the trip. All right. And his buddy says, all right, let's do it. So he zips up, and as they're coming up to it, they both get this just really awful feeling. This feeling that just a very nauseating feeling. Like they both instantly get headaches, and they both are just very nauseous. And they hear kind of this, like, it's almost like this kind of vibration or like a hum, almost like when a turbine is turning on, that kind of weird hum, kind of thrust noise. But it's not loud, it's not super overbearing. It's just something that they both can feel it and they can hear it. And that really sets both of them to not feeling good about any of this right now. So for some reason, the idea was to drive by and kind of loop back around and just scope it out. He said, I don't know if it was because of the instant sickness that I got and headache, or if it was that kind of the noise. He said, but instead of going by, I pulled right in. He goes, I pulled right in. He said, he had an old Jeep Cherokee, an old 1999 Cherokee, a beater. And he said, pulled right up to the gate. And there's no signs on the gate anywhere. There's no posted signs. There's no keep out. There's nothing. He said that the gate was brand new. You could tell that, it was something that wouldn't just be randomly and normally placed out in the middle of nowhere. It was not a cheap gate. There was nothing, you could tell this was serious, heavy duty. And he looks both ways in the woods on the side. He sees that there's a fence. Indeed, there is a fence running on both sides of that gate into the woods. And he looks at his buddy and he goes, what in the hell is going on? You know, he's like, I don't ever recall any military being in this region. He goes, and if I'm not mistaken, he said, there's an old fishing hole out that way. He said that dirt road, you know, brings you out to this old fishing area. And some guy owns the property out there. He's got a little house cabin out there. And he used to allow the locals to go and fish in this fishing hole. And he says, yeah, that's right. He said, what the hell's going on? He said, I don't know about you, but he said, it's not getting earlier, but I kind of want to look and see what's going on. And his buddy they're both really just feeling the headache. So he puts it in reverse and he starts to drive the same way they had just come from. So almost exactly the same way that military truck had gone. And his buddy's like, where the hell are you going? He goes, the still area, the area where the still is, that way a bit. Where are you going? He goes, and as they kept driving, he said, the noise and our headaches and whatever kind of feeling we had just kind of went away like nothing. He said it was strange, he said, because it was right about, the distance when we initially got the headache to where the gate was. Now, from the gate to where we were then, it would have been about the same distance. He said, so there's something's going on to have caused us a headache, to be very nauseous, to feel like we were being, we were in danger, that there was some threat out there. You don't think that's weird? And his buddy's like, absolutely. He goes, but I don't want to deal with it. He goes, those are, he said, I saw those guys. They have, military long rifles. He said, we got 2 pistols, each of us have a pistol and a shotgun. So what the hell are we going to do if we get caught? Just So he looks and he sees this old kind of ransacked house but off to the side, on the same side where that dirt roadway is. And he pulls in and he parks. And he gets out. He doesn't even give his buddy time to even dispute what the heck is going to happen. He jumps out of his Jeep. He goes to the back. He opens the cargo area of the Jeep, grabs their shotgun, racks it, and he said, all right, let's go. And he looks back, at his buddy, and his buddy's shaking his head like, no. He said, we'll just knock. We'll see what's up. If anyone's there, we'll let them know exactly, why we're here real quick. We'll just tell them something happened to the Jeep and we wanted to check something out real quick or whatever. And his buddy goes, I don't think there's anybody in this place. He goes, that's a shithole. And it really was. It's since fallen down. Now, actually, he thinks it since has caught on fire because some kids had been partying in it. So they do end up going up and knocking and nobody answers. And he starts to walk right through the backyard area. And he said, I want to see where the fence stops. He said, that fence was roughly about right here. And there's no fence. But he's in the woods a bit. And he's like, all right, so where is this fence end? And where does it go other than connecting to the gate? And they walk a little bit more towards where he believes the fence would be. His buddy, they kind of fanned out and they're talking amongst themselves. And they, not too far, maybe 100 to 200 feet, and they come to the corner of the fence. And he looks at his buddy and he goes, see? He said, this is private property. He said, they shouldn't have run any kind of fence in here. And he literally just starts walking along. So they found where the fence is that would connect to the gate, and he starts walking towards the woods. Boom, right along the fence. And his buddy's just adamantly like, let's go. This is ridiculous. Like they're just probably, playing war games out there. It's probably nothing. And for some reason, he stopped to turn and look at his buddy, and he leaned against the fence, and he got this just tremendous shock. Like a huge just bolt of electricity. Because when he touched it with the bare shoulder. Blah. And he said when that hit me, he said it was almost like back in basic when we were, doing everything, all our, military training and such. He said a few times we'd get tased. And he said that this was nothing like that. He said it was like 10 to 15 times worse. So they pass, they see the soldier, and they start to get that feeling where the pull-off was, where they had stopped after seeing the truck, turned around and decided to take the trip back. They pulled into there. And at this point, George's buddy is now kind of in charge. He said at this point, he said it seemed like from the very beginning, right when we saw the truck, all my instincts kicked in and I wanted to figure out what was going on. He said, I don't know if it was a soldier in me or if it was having kind of like a little bit of being upset that the military is in our area, that I had just gotten out. He was honorably discharged. But after his deployments, he kind of had like a little animosity towards everything. He was just, he was in a bad way. So he's like, at this point, he's like, my buddy has completely taken over. And he's like, pull over. So I pulled in and he goes, I thought he had to take a leak or something. He said, because I pull over and I stop and I put it in park and I don't turn the Jeep off. He said, but he's jumped out. He's already out of the Jeep and walking into the woods. And I'm sitting there like, okay, he's got to piss real bad. And he comes back out of the woods and he's like, are you coming? And he's like, I kind of gave him he said, I jumped out. I grabbed the shotgun. He said, I already had my pistol with me. He said, Jeff, it was almost as if it was meant to be. He said that little pull off, that little just where the trail is across the street. He said if you walked into the woods, he said, and you'd have to have known. He goes, because there's no way in hell you were going to find this just randomly. You'd had to know that fence was there. He said, but we walked out maybe 10, 15 feet into the wood line, and we went towards where the gate is. He said in 50 feet, and there it was, the corner of that fence. And he said, so we just kept walking down. And he said, I want to follow it and see, let's see if we can see on this side. Because as of up until now, they couldn't see anything on the two sides that they had already walked. Now they're walking and they're talking to each other. And for some reason, he told his friend, he's just randomly, he said, it was just something that I needed to say because I feel like he was talking too much. But he's like, I just looked at him and I said, just shut up. He's like, you're just talking too much. Shut up. And his friend looked at George and kind of laughed, like kind of just laughed it off because it was so out of the ordinary. And as he laughed that off, they heard some sort of growl. And they both looked at each other. And they looked towards the woods, just not knowing what this growl was. And they kind of scanned the area. And as he's scanning this way, his buddy's scanning behind him. And they both turn almost instantaneously and turn and look into that fenced-in area. And he said, there's woods in there, you could see. He said, but now at this point, you could see a clearing. He said, just beyond the trees. He said, on the inside of the fence, there was probably, none of those trees were close to the fence, close enough to the fence. They were like further back. And you could see where if any tree were to be within 10 feet of that fence on the inside, you could see stumps where they had been cut. He said, oh, also no branches. They were cleaned too. And he's like, that's when I realized this fenced in area, on top of making sure that the fence is maintained and still at its peak, there's no holes, there's no any kind of breaks, and that electricity is really coursing through, He said, had to easily be, 7,500 freaking volts. It was just a shock, and it hurt. That whatever was in there, they wanted to keep this fence line clear and maintained. So they could hear this growl, and they're looking, and they see what they can see just beyond the trees on that side, that there is a clearing. And in the trees, they see this kind of shadow moving. And he says shadow. He said, I'm going to say shadow at first because that's what it looked like. He said, that's exactly what this thing looked like. Because where and how it was almost blending into the woods. And me and my buddy got closer to the fence. And we were, about maybe 2 feet from the fence. We got as close as possible without. And he said, and we could feel those volts just coursing through that fence. And you could hear it, just that hum. And as we got closer, I said to him, "Do you feel that?" And he said, "Damn, that's strong." And, kind of, yeah, I know. But he said, "Do you think that because there's so much electricity right here and whatever's generating it," he said, "do you think that's why we got that feeling?" He goes, "Because I don't have that feeling anymore." And as they're talking about the feeling, no sooner did they start that conversation that they hear a growl. They're mid-sentence in the conversation. They hear a growl. And this just monstrous canine comes running out of the woods and literally just right towards them. And he said, "I thought that thing was coming through that fence, man." He said, and it just stopped short of touching that fence. He said, "I don't know how it stopped so quick and so to where it was almost right up against the fence, but not touching it at all." And it literally stopped on a dime. He said, "That thing's growling at me and my buddy." He said, "We're looking up at it." He's like, I'm not a very tall guy. He goes, "I'm 5'10". He said, "But my buddy's 6'1", 6'2". He's, much taller than I am. And I look up at my buddy. I look up to him. He's like, "I don't look up to him, but I look up to him." He said, "And we're both looking up to this thing." He said, "It's not, this ungodly 9-10 feet. He said, "It was about, I'd say maybe 7 feet." He said, not any shorter than 6.5 feet. He said, "This was huge." He said, "And the shoulders were just real thick." He said, "It was every bit of what a Dogman, when people describe them, looked like." He said, "And I heard you say the other day when we were talking about your experience, how they remind you of being farmer tough, or that athletic build, that basketball player, that swimmer build." He said, "And that's exactly what this thing had." He said, "It just looked strong from life." He said, "There was no six-pack abs and, under the hair." He said, "I'm looking at this thing's eyes, and they are just focused, accurately focused on just me and my buddy, looking down at us. These just kind of almost glowing in the daytime red eyes. And it lets out this last kind of bite / growl / bark, just this gnash." And my buddy shot this thing right in the chest. He said, "I don't know why he did this." He said, "I didn't even see him take out his freaking pistol." He said he raised it and just shot it right in its chest. And the thing kind of dropped back. It took a couple steps back and just dropped on the ground. And it started to make this weird noise. He said, and he had a 45. He said, "I don't know, how bad it was, but it dropped to the ground. And it was making this just weird kind of heavy breathing, this gurgling, weird, strange sound. And its just muzzle is open and it's gnashing and gasping for air." And he said, no sooner did that report come out of that gun and it echoed throughout the woods, He said, and that sumbitch dropped. He said, there were 4 soldiers. We could clearly see them running through the woods towards that fence, towards that creature, and towards us. He said they had their M4s, and they were dead ass running, screaming, don't you dare move, we will shoot you. Every command in the book they were yelling. He said, I grabbed my buddy's arm and I just pulled him and said, let's get the hell out of here. And we started running. He said, and for a second, he said, I thought we were in the clear. He said, until I heard a report and I heard a whiz and I heard a crack and then I heard another shot and then I heard a crack. And as we kept running, he's like, I don't know how, maybe because of where we were and how we were running through the woods to get to where my Jeep was. He said, but there was 3 or 4 shots and each one missed us by the grace of God. He said, we jumped in that Jeep and I threw it in reverse. And I went the way we were supposed to go. He said, I immediately just drove as fast as I could. And being an old Jeep, he said, that was not that fast. He said, I still have the thing. He said, it's parked in my backyard. He said, it still starts too. He said, we get to roughly where that still would be, that corn mash still. So I pull in this kind of pull off that's a dirt road, another dirt road, no gate. And this is not a graded dirt road. That dirt road where that gate is graded. He said, this is just a fire road that, you're not taking a Honda Civic down this thing. You need 4-wheel drive to literally. He said, you have a Subaru Forester. And he's seen it in my videos when I go up north. He said, that would probably have a hard time going through this thing. He said, it's a lot of jostling. He said, so we get in there and we get out and we're talking. He said, because that whole drive out of there, he said, we didn't say a freaking word. And we're talking about what had just happened. And I looked at him and I said, why the hell did you shoot that thing? He said, what is wrong with you? Why would you do that? And he said, I have no idea. He said, I saw it and I just shot it. I just shot it. He said, I look out, straight out, and he said, I see smoke coming out of the woods. He said, I knew damn well that still was right there. He said, I looked at my buddy. He said, I don't even want to do this anymore. He said, I don't even like what's going on. And his buddy said, George, I'm apologizing right now. He said, I don't know why I shot it. He said, I don't know what we're going to do. He said, but they were shooting at us. He goes, they can't shoot at us. We're Americans. We're in America. And he goes, George says, listen, he goes, if they have orders to shoot, if anyone is, attempting to make entrance and they have orders to either detain at any cost or shoot at any cost, they will. And they won't ask questions because that's what we do. And he just shakes his head. And they walk to the Jeep. They walk back to the Jeep because they're not too far off. And as they're walking to the Jeep, they hear this, rumbling coming down the road. And maybe a minute and a half go by, and it's one of those guys that owns the still. When he pulls in, and George and him don't get along too well. And he looks over at George and his buddy, and he's got this smile on his face, like he knows, exactly why they're there. And he gets out of his truck. This is a just big jacked up truck. Jumps out and says to him, what are you guys doing down here? And he looks at George. George, good seeing you. Out of the military. And he said, yeah. He said, I'll just come down the road here. He said, and there's literally 2 military jeeps at that gated road down there. There's a sheriff's car, and there's a bunch of dudes out there with guns. And they both look at each other and they're like, listen, he said, there's some shit going out there. And he looks at him, he said, get in your freaking truck. He said, follow me. He said, we'll go down here and talk. Pulls out, and they go in, and they're off the road now. Like that road to get to where they were was rough, but to where they had to get was even rougher. And they get in there, and they parked, and they are 2 miles in the woods, just deep in the woods, on private property. And they tell him what happened, and he said, one of them got out, again? One of them got out again. And he yells something. He goes, hey, someone got out again? Or it got out again? Or one of them got out again? And he hears George and they hear, they keep getting out, those some bitches. They got to kill them all. They should just kill them all. And they say, no, we shot it. He shot it in the fence. And the guy's face just got white. And he goes, they're going to be coming for you. And he said, who? He said, they're going to come for you. They're going to arrest you probably. He said, those things, he said, we shot at one night. He said, the military, he said, those guys came out here. He said, I don't know how they got out here so quick. He said, but we're sitting here and we shot at some. There was like 2 or 3 of them, and we shot at them, and probably no more than 40 minutes. He said, about 10, 15 soldiers come out of the woods from over there, from nowhere, just out of the woods right over there. That clearing. And they were harassed. They were, asked what they're doing. Do you want us to do not shoot at these things for sport. If they are going to harm you, yes. But they will not harm you. They will not attack you. We will not bother you. And you do not bother us, and you do not shoot at them. If they are attacking you or here's a phone number, and they handed them a card to contact, and we will take care of it. Which is kind of fucked up because it's 2010, and cell phone service was decent, but not great. Like what we have now. So if they're sitting out there and they got a flip phone, chances are they're not getting in touch with anybody. But to be told not to fire, it's... So they're sitting there, and about 20 minutes go by. And I said, all right, you guys are good. And the guy that, not the buddy, George looks over and says thank you to the guy that he knows and has had run-ins before. He's older than George by 15, 20 years, you know. And he looks at George and he's got 2 big jugs of corn mash alcohol, and he hands them to George and he says, thank you for your service. He said, y'all have a good one. He said, next time you decide you want to come and rob us, he said, make sure you come to us before you go to that thing. He kind of let out a laugh. And they get in the Jeep and they drive out. And as they're driving out, they are immediately stopped. Right at that road. Boom. They are quickly, sheriff and one military Jeep. Sheriff gets out and just sees that it's small area. Sheriff knows George's dad and says, George, how are you? He said, I haven't seen you since, you went in the service. He said, your old man said you were out. He said, yes, sir. And he said, you're going to see the brothers, huh? He said, yes, sir. He said, you didn't hear any gunshots while you were down there, did you? He said, no. He said, last I knew, they couldn't, have any guns down there. He said, yeah, well, they do. They had gotten in trouble back in the day, so they couldn't legally possess a. And he said, well, did you guys shoot anything today? And he said, no, we didn't shoot anything. And his cop looks at his buddy. He said, hey, how are you? He said, I'm good. He said, listen, he said, something got real close to that military clearing out there where that fence line is, and they're both playing dumb. Like, fence line, what are you talking about? He said, don't bullshit me. He said, if you did it, tell us now and don't come back to that area, but we know you did it. And his buddy kind of nods his head and says, listen, we were standing there. We had to take a leak. He said, we were standing, taking a leak, and we heard some noise, so we walked down in there. And that's when this thing came rushing out of the woods at us, and I instinctively just shot it. And the guy that's with the sheriff, the military, he said, yeah. He said, all right, well, he said, if any more escape up here, don't be shooting at them. Don't be doing shit to them. Just get out of here. And I said, all right. And they're set on their way. And probably April 24th, so a week after that, sheriff, the deputy, pulls into George's parents' house, and he said, have you seen your buddy? And he said, I haven't talked to him in a couple days. Why? What's going on? And he said, well, we got to talk to him about something, and he's wanted down there in that area. The military want to talk to him. And George says, listen, he said, my dad. He said, you know my dad. He said, what's out there? I'm not going back out there. He said, I don't know where my buddy is. He said, but I know there's some shit going out there just from when I was over on deployment. He said, I seen some shit. He said, but whatever's out there, he said, they're up to no good. They're up to no good. And you're their errand boy. So what do you think is going on? You got to know something. And he said, listen, he said, all I know is we were told not to interfere in anything that's going on out there. He said, I'm only telling you this because you guys saw something with your own damn eyes. He said, but supposedly there's some sort of base out there. He said, it's not ground level. He said, meaning it's underground. He said, and on occasion, one or two are smart enough to get out and they'll run around that contained area. He said, but before they had kept up with the trees and, how they groom the trees and maintain everything. Before that, a few had gotten out. He said, and that's when they started to groom the area and make sure none of them could use the trees to get out. That, if they did, they'd have to jump an exceedingly far distance. Chances are, if they did jump, they'd land on that fence and, either be stuck on it or zapped and pushed the other way. We don't know. He said periodically a truck will come in and out, one of those big trucks, and we followed it right out to county lines going towards, a different part of the state. And we were just told not to interfere. He said, one night I followed one. He said, I was told to accompany it out of the county. He said, and as I was accompanying it, he said, I had my lights on. He said, I saw two soldiers in the back. And he said, I saw something else. This was before I even knew what was going on. He said, I saw something else that was in the middle. He said, it was every inch of one of these Dogman werewolf creatures. He said, so I think that what they're doing is they're moving them. Maybe they're creating them there or whatever. We know they're not creating them, that they're, there is a breeding program, but all looking for corn mash, alcohol. They stumble upon some sort of military breeding program in Virginia. Now, I know that per Victor, that there's one underneath the CIA farm over by Newport. Is that where they're bringing these? Is this where they're, hauling these things to? Is this where Victor had been? Who knows? But imagine being his buddy and having one of these son of a bitches come up to that fence. Would you shoot it? I mean, you're startled. Shit, I would. And not blame him. Anyway. He hasn't messed around with anything since. This has changed he actually stopped talking to that buddy of his and kind of went on the straight and narrow. 2012, he kind of departed the area and then came back, but he's just, how the hell, man, damn it. And there's another, and that got me thinking after he and I let each other go. There's a kid, and I can't remember exactly where. I tried to look through the paperwork, but it's on an upload. That kid that had seen a military kind of Dogman facility in Virginia as well. So we know there's one in Newport underneath the farm. There's one where this kid saw one and one where George saw one. And Victor did say there was more than one in Virginia. And there you have it, folks. I do hope you all enjoyed this second and night-ending bonus as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. I'd really like to thank you all for supporting the channel. After all, it is your support that helps the channel to continue to grow and go, and what gives us all a place and a chance to share our experiences and theories judgment-free. Everyone is simply treated with the respect that we deserve. Please stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, pets, family, and our friends. These creatures are real. These events have happened. Share this information with those you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions, never stop searching for the truth, and God bless you all.